Don't misunderstand, none of this is in defense of the alleged actions of the Massachusetts man or his acolytes. Rather, it's an effort to understand what gave rise to the behavior so as to prevent it from happening again. Yesterday, I tracked down Professor Galloway. He was in Japan. I wanted to ask him about this breach of national security. He told me his hunch is that we're going to find that this guy made a series of bad decisions. He said that when he reads the initial accounts, he doesn't feel angry as much as he feels upset that it's part of a growing problem in America where we're no longer looking out for one another, where 1 in 7 men have no longer a single friend, where the number of young people who see their friends every day has been cut in half in the last 10 years, and it all circles back to the same thing. The digital version of anything is an inferior analog to its offline counterpart. Or as I have explained here, we've self-sorted. With the aid of the internet, we've isolated ourselves into narrowly defined political and social associations where we aren't in the physical presence of one another. Consequently, bad behavior isn't policed in the same way that it would be if we were face to face. Nobody is standing there as they would be in church or in the workplace or maybe at the bowling league to say, hey, you can't say that, or hey, you shouldn't do that. In short, there are no guardrails online. Extremism isn't shunned the way that it would be, we hope, in person. Instead, it breeds and it multiplies. Alliances are forged regardless of proximity among those who'd otherwise be unknown to one another. Again, if convicted, this young man needs to be punished harshly. But the situation will repeat itself until we address what drives it. A lack of faith in institutions, distrust in government, joblessness, social isolation, lack of romantic interests, and real relationships. My next guest gets it. I have watched and recommend his TED Talk. It is called Where the Alt-Right Came From. Dale Buran is a lecturer at Morgan State University. He's the author of It Came From Something Awful, How a Toxic Troll Army Accidentally Memed Donald Trump into Office. Dale, thank you for being here. My radio listeners have cautioned me all week not to go blaming an entire platform. But to me, it seems like a pretty familiar story. Young men, they're isolated, they're bonding online, in this case over guns and gear and God. What do you see?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I think your analysis is pretty correct that indeed the larger sort of sociological problems that created this environment. So things just being difficult for young people, that they have a difficult time economically or just sort of getting out of their parents' house or getting a foothold in life, combined with sort of ever expanding, alluring online world. And as you say, that environment breeds antisocial behavior. It is sort of a substitute for loneliness, substitute for companionship, but not doesn't actually provide the real thing. So spending a lot of time online ends up being bad for your mental health. So you have a lot of young men radicalizing or being more extreme than they would because they're spending all their time dropped out online. And that is sort of one of the backgrounds to what's happening in this story.
Still so much that we don't know about these 24, and we could have a separate conversation as to what level of culpability they bear. But based on what I heard you say in your TED Talk, if this is similar to other online activity and conversations, they are self-perceived losers who derive strength from being in numbers, right? Isn't that a large part of it?
Right. So my TED Talk was related to 4chan, which was the 3rd or 4th place these leaks appeared and seemed to be connected to these communities, at least culturally. So the larger set of discords that these leaks appeared in, and then finally in 4chan, all sort of share a culture of dropped out, idle young men who don't really have a lot of prospects in life, or at least trying to kind of figure things out. But as they fall into the internet, as you said, they sort of end up getting a very distorted picture of reality, of politics, as they're trying to sort of process these ideas through memes or whatever. So what ends up happening is that they feel like, oh, they have some sort of place where they can get an unvarnished truth. And what ends up happening is they get a distorted picture of the truth. So they end up believing in conspiracy theories or sort of radical ideas. And they do it indeed glom together in a coalition. They feel like, oh, we have a set of shared values. And and that has produced political movements in the past, like the alt-right. Here, though, it seems to have, kind of sort of connected with a vaguely disenchanted, right-leaning group of young men. That's sort of the way to sort of characterize this vaguely political or cultural movement that is sort of online. And sometimes that reflects itself in political action. But here it was sort of like a little bit of an accident, sort of a messy situation where he had these extreme beliefs and he didn't mean to do something overtly political.
The takeaway I'm hoping to leave with viewers is that there's a bigger issue lurking here than just one guy who's a 21-year-old Massachusetts Air National Guardsman. There's a much deeper seated problem that we need to come to terms with. I hope people watch your TED Talk and read your book, and I thank you.
Sure. Thank you.